literally put it in his face. It was like right here.
You're like, look at this loogie.
It's like on the video.
Welcome once again to Chill Filtered, the podcast where we drink whiskey so you don't have to. But you probably should. You probably are. Hey, that's why we like you. Really excited for today's episode. But before I talk about what we're doing today, let's talk about some business. Hey, we're still kicking off on YouTube. We've been a podcast for 315 plus episodes now. But we're really trying to hit this YouTube thing hard. And we don't want to fake it. We don't want to buy our listeners. We don't buy our viewers or anything like that. We just want to kick it off. And I think what helps is your likes and your subscribes, but also comments. We love reading your comments and responding to them. That's the way you can support us this week. This week on Chill Filtered, I have a very special guest. And before I introduce her, I want to talk about a product that we got to try on a drink along recently, where we send and courier out samples to our listeners. And special pours, really rare pours and stuff like that we get to do if you're on our Patreon support site, patreon.com/chillfiltered. And we tried this one. It's Louisiana handcrafted whiskey. It is a rice whiskey. And I was blown away. And I was like, okay, Bryan's going to be out for a few weeks and I need to find some co-hosts, some guest co-hosts. And I want to introduce you all to Mia Albaugh. I think I got it right. But Mia, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm chugging along. It is hot out here, and I'm hot. You can see the sweat, and I had to turn off this
we're glistening. It's just what do they call it? Like the makeup routine? The face routine. That's what I say every time I'm glowing. I'm like, I'm not sweating.
I love that. Yeah, because you're like near the Gulf Coast right now. Like you're like.
Humid.
Yeah,
and I don't even want to go outside. So sad because I hate being cooped up inside.
It's terrible. I feel the same way. It's like I need to get out, but I also hate being out sometimes because it's just so hot.
Yes, but this is also the season where you don't know how to dress because it's like the Arctic inside. I don't understand why people feel like we have to be so dramatic. You walk in and I'm like shivering, and then it's sweating outside.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
No, it's just a funny time. And and for our listeners, they always know that I only wear jeans, like full length jeans
all the time.
And it's starting to get to me, at least this time of year. So yeah, our listeners will
stick to me. I wouldn't even be able to like get them on. They just stick. Like
that's kind of what it is sometimes. And luckily they're a little baggy. So yeah, you could. Yeah, it's a funny time. But so you are the VP of Fruge Companies, which I pronounced wrong on the drink along. It's Fruge, which is
we
French
answer to whatever
or Cajun or
it's Cajun French. It is for French culture. Mm-hmm. It has an accent over the E, which gets forgotten a lot. But when it is there, I think people do feel more confident in doing that little fancy A at the end.
No, that's awesome. Oh yeah, I need to get into that. I gotta say, Mia, it's cool to have you on. It's because first of all, we got to try J.T. Meleck, and I think that day we followed you guys on Instagram, and then I see all these amazing stories from Mia, and I was like, this girl knows her stuff, is very passionate, you could tell, and here's the thing. I think it's a compliment, and I hope it is a compliment. I thought you were potentially, I didn't really think brand ambassador, but I thought like probably the top dog in marketing.
Yeah.
But to hear like you're kind of a bigger deal in the company than even that, and to see your passion show on the marketing side is really cool.
Thank you.
How did you even get into this whole Fruge and distilling, as well as, I mean, it sounds like you're not just on the distilling, you deal with a lot of the grain stuff, but anyway, I want to hear it from you.
I have no idea how we got here. I feel like my father's addicted to entrepreneurship is pretty much the best way to say it. Like, and a lot, not just entrepreneurship, but the sustainability piece of what I like to say is, embedded, you never waste anything on your plate. So like, back in the day, everyone has a grandma that if you make a plate, you better eat every single bite. Like every single bite, you're going to sit there until you eat it all. And that's pretty much the equivalent of like all the different like companies and things we have going on at the farm, because from a far point, people, it looks chaotic when you look at all the different things that we do. But when you actually look at it like a nice little plate, everything has a purpose. And so basically nothing goes to waste and everything has a purpose that then starts something else in a different adventure. In terms of spirits, Fruge Spirits, which were branded named J.T. Meleck. I went the wrong side, this side. J.T. Meleck stands for our great uncle John Meleck, which actually I was supposed to be named Meleck. It sounds way better on a brand. So I'm glad that I don't have to say that that's my name. Yes.
I was supposed to be named Shelly if I was a girl, which was a last name in the family.
Yes. Like my mom was like, it sounds like a dead fish for a little girl. Like, we're not going there. So I was named after Mama Mia instead. So we veered, which is good because it sounds way better on a brand. My brother's actually named, we think it's John Tristan. That's the JT. And my brother's name is Tristan John. So he was named after him, keeping it in the family there. And it came from when we lost value in our rice crop. And if you know anything about farming and all these things, it's just, it basically comes down to it. It happened, but when the aquaculture came, so before people had crawfish, everyone was just rice farmers around here. You can make a living. You just rice farmed. And about the late 70s, early 80s, the same thing that happened that started JT Meleck is the same thing that happened with aquaculture. So it became unaffordable for farmers to just farm rice. They had to do something else. Well, at the time, LSU Ag was doing a lot of research and found that they were embedded species in terms of working well together and do inverted seasons. So you can bring in aquaculture crawfish into your rice crop without damaging it. It adds value to it. And that's how people started doing. And so that's why you see the crawfish and the rice, because we've been farming crawfish and rice on our farm since the 80s. Rice since we think 1896, which is why you see that date on the bottle when John planted the first rice crop. But the sustainability measure to keep our rice farm going was the crawfish in the 80s. Well, in the early 2000s, the same thing happened. And rice farmers that have been doing it for generations had to stop, make decisions, not plant. It became more expensive to plant than it was to sell the rice to the mill. And so all these farmers were just getting really creative. We're not the only ones that have done something very cool with rice. We have somebody 15 minutes up the road that makes diabetic rice. So they basically do the exact opposite of what we do. While we add sugar to our rice to create alcohol, they pull the sugar out to make it diabetic safe for those with diabetes to eat rice. Yeah, so we have I think it's called Parish Rice. And it's a local product that I think they ship as well, that it's rice that's safe for those with diabetes to eat. So everybody was coming up with these other ways that outside of the mill that they could do something with their crop to keep it going. And we had a couple of different things, random here and there. And I laugh because we did not expect to be doing this. I laugh sometimes. I had to one day say, I think it was when we first launched our whiskey, I had to look at my dad and I was like, you got to stop referring it to a side hustle because it ain't no side hustle. This is not a side hustle. Side hustles are supposed to work by themselves. And I think you thought that's what it would do, just work by itself. But it is not. It's way more than we ever thought it would be. And we started it to add the value, but my father was a martini guy. And so we were basically in a family meeting to stop. We were shutting it down. And my uncle's the farmer. So the actual person that plants and harvests is my uncle. It's my dad's brother. And so to tell a farmer who's been doing the farming his whole life that he's not going to farm doesn't happen, So we're just in this awkward meeting where my dad, who does the business side of things, is telling him to not plant. And my uncle's like, what do you mean? We have to plant. And he's like, no, you can't plant. And it was just, so we're coming up with all these ideas. And finally someone made a joke. Honestly, someone I think it was basically told us to calm down. Basically, let's just all relax. Let's make a drink. Hell, take your rice, make some vodka or something. And let's just have a martini and chill out. And that's where the joke came from. And then we started doing all kinds of research and realized that you do actually just need a grain, and rice is in that category. And so it was just going to be something we were going to moonshine it up, just make some random stuff. Yeah. We made vodka for a quite a bit long time, just sharing it before really distributing it. And we tried like 7 different styles, worked with somebody. And then Fruges are very competitive, very competitive. And so you try to say like, I'm good, I'm not going to do that. But if you say we can't do something, so basically somebody decided to tell us that we can't make rice whiskey. It's impossible. And so somebody bet us. And so that's where this whiskey came from. We had no really intention to create a whiskey. We should thank this person now. But we were just going to do the vodka and just create something that was just another measure locally. And it made a very good vodka. And if you haven't had it, I highly recommend. I don't drink vodka.
Love to try it,
but I drink Meleck. I should have sent you one of those things, but I couldn't wrap it in the aluminum foil package.
Had it perfectly.
I'll send you a little handshake of it. But it's really, really good. And then somebody said no. And so it wasn't until we did it just based on, we're going to do it anyway. Maybe prove that you couldn't. And so that's like when most people will try and make their decisions at 2 years. And our whiskey was not good at 2 years, to be honest. We thought we had nothing. We didn't think anything of it. Kind of like, oh, well, that sucks, And it wasn't until 3 years when we realized, oh, that's when it really started to come. And it's still to this day starting to come out each year. And so we're still like adapting as we go. If you asked us back when we were talking about a sustainable measure, because I've had people like the ones that actually critically think and understand what I mean by adding value to the rice crop will literally be like, so you're telling me that you are losing value in your crop. So the solution to that was to buy thousands of barrels and store them for 5+ years without any understanding of whether they would be worth anything. And I'm like, you got it. That's exactly what we did. It's the stupidest decision ever, but hey, it worked. And here we are, because if it wouldn't have been good, it would have been the stupidest decision ever. But we had to take a leap of faith and just like, you can't, I don't think people understand how much goes into doing this. It is very difficult in the amount of like stress that you have to put forward and risk and wait. I mean, it's a waiting game, and we're not patient people. So, I hope I answered your question. I like to tell stories.
No, you did. No, it was perfect.
Forget the question altogether.
Yeah, me too. What was the first point? Like, do you remember what year it was when you were like, all right, let's put this in a barrel?
Yes, we put our first barrel. We tested in 2017. So we tested with what we thought were the big boys. It's always the joke. We did 30-gallon barrels. So we had this, we basically called anybody and everybody that would help us, give us advice when we were like, we're going to do this. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Those people are why we're here. Like it's like a lot of luck. We have a lot of luck on our side, but a lot of luck of some of the best people in the industry answered the phone, and we wouldn't be here without specific advice in terms of like little tiny decisions that you would never think of, that you would need a professional to say, hey, just remember when you're doing this, you want to think about that. And we would have been like, oh, that can change everything. And we're so lucky and fortunate to have some of these like really powerful people in this industry answer our call. I think a lot of it was like, what are these farmers doing in Louisiana? Let's go take a trip to New Orleans. We'll stop by and see what these jokers are doing, And one of them came by to like kind of look over, and we were showing them. We were so proud. We filled 15 30-gallon barrels thinking we were going to feed the nation. This is it. Like, we just filled it up, and we were proud. Like, with this little puppy just learned a new trick, and we're waiting for this guy to be like, oh, so you're serious whiskey makers, This guy started laughing at us, and he was like, what is this? He said, what the F is this? So we're looking, funny. He's like, if you're going to be a real whiskey maker, you better buy a real whiskey barrel. And I looked at him, and I was like, is this not a real whiskey barrel? Like, I'm like trying to, what is it? Like, I thought this was a real whiskey barrel, and it was just a 30-gallon instead of 53, which is why we had a 6-month gap between the special release we did in 2021 and the actual launch of our whiskey in 2022, because we had to figure out how to buy 53-gallon barrels, which is, you can't just call somebody and they deliver barrels. Like, if you're competing with these brands that are getting thousands of barrels a day. And so, the first barrel, so to answer, the first barrel went down in 2017. But the actual lock it in, we're doing this in terms of like dedicating ourselves to at least putting down 2 years worth was 2018. But it was actually in the middle of, it was right kind of after COVID ended. when we pulled a sample, and that's when we kind of like had a discussion, like, this is it, we're doing this. Like, this is, and so it wasn't until 2021 where we then upped production. So that's why it gets confusing to people when we talk about where we are. We haven't, we talked about time. We have not gotten to the point where we have enough product to move because we haven't gotten to our piece where we up production yet. So we are still consistently at the same number of barrels. I'll have the same number next, but in the next 18 months, the following year, that's when we go from like 144 barrels to 356. Then we go to 600 something, then 1,000. Nice. And then that's where we like move from there, because it wasn't until that mark just a few years ago where we actually got it. And we realized that this is it. We're doing it, because it just finally showed up. There was a minute there where we really thought it wasn't, and we weren't going to be doing this. So it's a wild ride every day. You never know what's going to happen.
So so someone, told you and, challenged you in a way to say, hey, you can't make whiskey with rice. Why was the reason? What was the reason for that? Like, cause you can.
I really don't know. And this is something we rack our brain about. I still rack my brain about this. And it kind of like, it goes into like the whole marketing and how we, the whole like the side hustle piece and all these like comments comes from that. Coming from a Cajun culture where everything is embedded in rice, you don't do anything without rice. Like my husband being from the Midwest, when we met, he was like, you make rice with everything? And I'm like, we make rice with everything. And so it adds, it's an enhancer grain. It takes in, it doesn't stand alone. You don't put a pile of rice on the side and you eat it by itself. It enhances whatever you make. So you make a delicious gumbo, it enhances it. It doesn't save it. Totally. If you made a bad gumbo, the rice is not going to help it taste better, And so rice being so embedded in this culture, we did not think that we were going to introduce ourselves to a culture that saw it as such a negative. And I don't know why it's a negative, but the only thing we're very ignorant as a whole culture and country in terms of rice when it comes to making things outside of just a gravy. And so, and that's nobody's fault. But when it comes to first thing people think, let me back up. We really thought if we can make a quality product, something that we thought was delicious. I mean, the vodka, again, I don't drink vodka. I only drink ours because there is a significant difference between the shit, the stuff. And it is like vodka has a reputation for being fast, cheap, getting out there and forward, you save a bunch of money. That's not what ours is. It's very much quality. When the whiskey came out, we only released it when we believed in it. And so we were like, they're going to try it. It's something new. They're going to grab that. They're going to be interested. They're going to see the crawfish. And the minute they taste it, just like you said, you tasted it, they're going to be hooked and it's going to do its job. Yeah. Instead, it just sat there and people go, rice? No, I don't drink rice. You can't make a whiskey with rice. Or they'll go Japanese. I don't drink Japanese products. Or they'll go sake. I don't even like sake. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, that was a shock for us to like, I had to really like sit back and stop everything and really think about how we were going to strategize ourselves in a marketing manner, knowing that we were almost already failing. We were going over a failure hump before anybody ever even tried us to call us a failure. And that was something we did not see coming. And I think we were also ignorant on that side when we were doing these things. We're in a culture of rice. And before we started this, we had to do a lot of research into what we're doing. So like to know that that's not a single malt, it's not a Scottish, it's not a sake. It's not even, it wasn't even in my brain to even prepare for a marketing because it's not that. So I didn't think that other people would think that it is. And so it became this wild ride of, okay, so it's not going to sell itself. Now we have to really back up and reinvent the wheel. There's no other product like this. So it's a shock factor. And I don't know why rice is negative, but it is. Everybody sees rice and they're like, no, that's not for me. And I'm like, I'm telling you. But I know that we have gotten somewhere because there are 3, just off the top of my head, 3 award like contests that I've put myself in for the last 3 years that I have called and written like a letter each time stating that there's no place for me to put my product. And where should I put it? Because there's no rice category. There's nothing like you go in here, don't get lost. It really doesn't categorize it. Because sometimes they'll decline you if the pieces don't match up. Because a bourbon has to be 51% corn. I can't just put myself in a bourbon category, because it's not. And they all have rice whiskey sections now. So I know, and
Nice.
you'll start seeing like rice whiskeys come up. Now it's only like 10% in the mash bill, but still, I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to take it. We're going to take it. Say that J.T. Meleck has started the line for rice whiskey. And so 100%. It's changing, but to answer it, I have no idea, but it's not positive. Rice is not a positive grain in spirits.
That makes sense.
Yet.
Which I think is to your guys' benefit in a way.
Yeah.
Because you guys are on the cutting edge of rice whiskey, and it's exciting. Definitely. Like I literally told Bryan, I said, if we're ever going to start distilling, we need to pick up rice, because that's like, you know, like you guys are really like, and doing it right by aging it so long and using full-size barrels. You guys are doing it right, because it's like, this is a delicious product. This really, really caught me off guard. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, it's rice. How good could it be? I mean, like, we got corn, the crop of the U.S., you know, and we got rye, which is, you know, historically one of the better, you know, northern, you know, states kind of grains. And, but then it's like, you try it and you're like, I need to get on this. Like honestly, if I were to start distilling, like, I would mess around with corn, but I would get into that rice too, because you guys have proven that it is competing with the big dogs. Which is super cool to me.
Yeah. It's quite wild. It's kind of like first to market almost thing. Like you see a brand, and whoever sees a brand first categorizes them as that thing, whether it's like tissues or whatever it may be. And so when you have corn, it was just an excess of the crop that people didn't want to waste. That's how the whole thing's. Ironically, when people say, oh, a bunch of farmers in Louisiana, I'm like, actually, alcohol started from farmers not wanting to lose their grain. 100%. So they had to do something with their crop in order to not waste it, which came alcohol. And I think if you think about corn and rice, if you were to just put pieces of the grain on the table and put like water on top, the rice will absorb into the water and take it over and create like soft and sticky and whatever it is. Whereas you put it on corn doesn't change at all. It doesn't disintegrate. It doesn't absorb in there. It's harsh. It's a harsh crop. And so it's so interesting if you look and you're looking at something that doesn't break down immediately and you look at something that does, you would think that it would just show in your brain like, oh, that's why bourbon is now, it developed into 51%, because it needed the grains that allows it to break down and be softer. Because if you think about 100%, that is something harsh happening. That's very, very harsh. It's not a sweet grain. You know, you have some sweet corn, but it doesn't make sweet stuff. It's definitely the other items and the processes that helps it create sweet items, if that makes sense. I'm digressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys, I mean, you guys use 100% rice. That's what I came into you guys like don't use any sort of malted barley or anything.
We do everything ourselves.
That's amazing. And, you know, so I'm sure like even someone who would come to you guys and say like, you can't make rice whiskey. They're thinking like, I mean, most people don't make 100% corn whiskey. Apparently it has a lot to do with the malted barley breaking down some enzymes and stuff like that. But like you guys are rocking 100% rice grain whiskey.
Yeah.
And you're pulling it off. Do you find that there's like, do you know anything about the ratio of sugars versus like corn or anything like that? Like, will you have to put a lot more into the mash?
I don't know like into the details. I'll tell you, even when you do research and you learn, I'm maybe like conspiracy theorist in the terms, but nobody will ever tell you the full thing. It's like my grandmother, who's a fantastic cook. She left me a cookbook. It's missing pieces. I'm telling you, whether it's like, you know, a point off of this or this, like not enough sugar, but it's off on purpose because she's like, no, this is what I'm famous for. And you're going to have to figure it out if you want your own biscuits, you know?
I love that.
Even when you do, so I say that because in terms of the product and what they say they do versus the different varieties and things and concepts that you get, I don't think it's possible. There has to be different styles, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I also am not educated enough into the corn crop itself. I know more about rice. So when you get into rice, people think rice is one. There are so many types of varieties and they all have a different purpose. It's why like people that try to make sushi at home or fried rice will just use their normal
like
rice.
Long grain rice or something. Yeah.
Yeah. They're getting frustrated with they can't. I'm like, that's not the correct rice. There's all kinds of different styles, which is, we tried a lot of different varieties. And let me tell you, some of them are not good. Like they're not good. So it would be if somebody only had access to one variety, was like, okay, let's test this on a small batch. or they use a certain variety in a bourbon as the 10%. And they're like, I didn't like what it did as comparison to blank. It could then create a reputation for rice in terms of going the wrong way if you're not using something proper for what you're making, that then goes into your sugars and all the different pieces, the ABVs, the distillation, the exit proof. I mean, every single piece will make a difference. And so when you're changing one thing, you have to like almost figure out what exactly it's changing down the line, because it doesn't, your end result is going to be different, but one small change can make it better or worse. Or I don't know if that made sense. It made more sense. No, it did. But that's like how I think about it, how it came. If that makes sense.
No, that's perfect. I guess a follow-up question with that is like, I remember the first time I had a non-traditional whiskey. I was in Park City, Utah, and I went to the the kind of the forefront or the face of what is that one? High West Distillery. And it was like on that main street in Utah, and I had an oat whiskey. And I was like, oh, this is super cool, like mostly oat, or at least maybe I don't remember what it was, but it was mostly oat at least. And I was like, oh, this is different. Like it was almost bright, refreshing, almost like a gin in terms of refreshing, but it was, definitely a whiskey. And then, after that, I tried, a wheat whiskey here and there, which is, I would say it's on the verge of traditional, but it's non-traditional in terms of the grain, or at least the grain bill. And then so my point is that there are somewhat bigger companies like, Bernheim's is one of those wheat ones. They're with Heaven Hill, and then High West put out that oat whiskey, which is not a typical product for even them. But then these like different grains are like kind of one-offs, and they're I've heard of even a sorghum whiskey, quinoa whiskey from Corsair, stuff like that, where it's like it's always a one-off. But what I appreciate about JT Meleck is that this is what you guys do. This is what you guys are proud of, and this is not only what you're proud of. This is what you were proud of before whiskey was there. Like you guys sound like rice people to the core, which is a great thing. I'm a huge rice fan, for the record. But then on top of that, you guys are not only rolling with the rice, and as you already have, like I said, but you're making sure it's a good product. And the fact that you said it took, X amount of years for even those 30-gallon batches to turn out right. You didn't want to put a product out where it was like a 2-year. That's exciting. And I guess I'll follow up with this. So I assume you're setting aside a few of the barrels for higher ages, because normally what I'm seeing on these bottles is 4 years, which is working so far.
Yeah.
But I do think, it sounds like, you guys think as well that it very might benefit from even more years, which makes sense. But
yes, we are going to have a 6-year this year. We actually just dumped it yesterday. So we're going to have our first batch of 6-year. We actually, going back into, I don't know if you're off recording or on when you're talking about that we wait, I think that's another challenge for us, is that we're in such a world of, it's different than it was, people buying barrels, MGP, importation, not really making it, fees, this and that. People think it just like happens overnight, and that's really difficult for us, because I'm like, every decision we make is years off, or it like F's up years off, if that makes sense. And one of the things is we are going to have enough for 2 batches. We were holding 30% of what we were each year in order to get 2 dumps worth of our 6-year, so roughly 25 barrels. And we had the 30-gallon barrel, the story I told you prior. We had that. We released the first one. It was 4 years in 2021. Now that whiskey itself was one of the ones that we had, but we did a release because we had it, and it was 4 years. It was something at the time that my father did enjoy. He liked it. He wanted to launch it. But I will tell you that when we voted, I did not. So it was very much a characteristic. And if you ask, there was only 1,000 bottles. So if you do ask people that did have, it's called a Founders Edition, you'll either people hated it or loved it. And so, but it was a 30-gallon. It was really rough, really edgy. But some people are like, oh my God, this is so cool. It just wasn't for me. Now we kept half of it. So we only launched half, and we kept half to do an experimentation, and we matched 53. So the concept of the 30 is a rushed. It should rush you about a year. It should go 6 months every year or so. So you're seeing your whiskey almost develop faster than what we're doing. So we capped half in order to kind of help us along, because if it started to go more south, like, because it could have been more like the reverse of what we were saying at 2 years. So we kept half. We taste it every 6 months. And as it's developing, we're kind of getting an understanding of what our whiskey is doing at 4, 5, 6, all this stuff. When we get here and we're tasting it, we tasted it last winter, and they're very good at single barrels. Now, do they compete with some of our award-winning 53-gallon? I wouldn't say that, but they're definitely they developed from that 2021 launch. We're going to do single barrels. It wasn't because of glitch. We ended up having an error, and we had to hold them back, and we couldn't launch them. Thankfully, that ended up to be really great, because we tasted it the other day. The 30 gallons are about 7 years. Some of them are 7. Some of them are just almost over 6. We tasted and we dumped, and this is the equivalent of what we predict to be about an 8.5 year of our whiskey. And it is so good that we looked at each other and we were like, we should have ordered more 30 gallons. Like, so now we're like, as soon as we launch this, we're going to have a 7-year 30-gallon barrel as well, like very, very small launch. But now that goes back to that conversation of we're looking around like, do we wait 7 years, or is it just something that we talk about, for years? Remember that 30-gallon barrel, remember that 30-gallon. And so we're, that 7 years is a long time. You're like, that's really long. So now we had the 2 batches of the 6-year, and we made the decision to cut it in half and only have 1 batch to move that batch along for 8 years, because this 30-gallon is predicted to be even better than the 4, assuming that the math does add up. Again, we're all just guessing and figuring it out. So then that cuts all of our barrels. So then we go down to production in more states, and people are saying, why aren't you more states? I'm like, because I just made the decision to cut this and have an 8-year. And so then that brings us back more. And now we're upping, and we have to up our percentages, which ups the barrel quantity, which is then just all a risk in itself. And so there's definitely pieces every single day in terms of what goes on, and every decision affects another decision. But in terms of years, our whiskey is getting better every single year. It just continues to get better. The 4.5, I say 4.5 because we do go on harvest season. So in our batch, the 15 or the 12 barrel, some of them are 4 and some of them are 5. So we just say 4+. So it's about 4.5 day average. But that's like, that creates consistency, and that's where our stuff is. But it is getting better and better and just developing. I don't know when it will cap and just like go south. We do stress about that. Like at one point, because whiskey will always hit a point and then you'll lose it the minute it goes off. So we do stress about those things, especially when we're having extremely hot summers. I'm sure if I said extremely cold winters, other people in other states, like, you would laugh at us. But we have had some breezes that have like affected like our crop, which then affects all the process ahead. So, but longer term. So we're coming up on this year.
I love that. So let's drink a little bit. Should I imagine I should start. You sent me the small batch and a single barrel. Should I start with the small batch?
Yeah, start with the small batch.
Okay, cool. That's
always be like, anytime I do tastings with people, I always start them with the vodka. And this is a fun fact. A lot of people think like, oh, I don't mix alcohol. But with this, you're not mixing anything because it's the same stuff. So they're all made with the same rice. So you're getting that barrel. Not to say that the process is not making vodka and whiskey is not the same process, but it comes down to the grain itself. This goes into a barrel, but they're made with the same rice. And you can taste when you start here, you then appreciate what the grain is doing across the board and how it's moving. And it's quite the experience. Cool. So I start with people and then they're like, they can't believe vodka tastes like that. And there'll even be people listening that there's no way. And then they try and they're like, holy crap, it's crazy. So I always start with the lower and move up the proofs.
With the vodka, is that a thing? Rice vodka? Like, are you still on like a cutting edge of rice vodka as well, besides rice whiskey? Probably
not. I would say vodka is made with a lot of stuff. Now, I will say most people think that it's only made with potatoes. It's not. It's made from tons of stuff, and we're not the only rice vodka. There's one in North Carolina, so might be sold in Virginia. There's one in North Carolina. There's one in California. There's one in the Midwest somewhere. Different styles. Now, look, that's so interesting. And that goes back to like, I don't know enough about other crops like potatoes and corn, all these things to say, if you're making a potato vodka, does that make those vodkas the same? Because while there are other rice vodkas, they are not the same, and they won't taste the same because it's not the same variety. And even if you were to coincidentally have the same variety, a North Carolina farmer will not make a Louisiana farmer's rice. Their rice will not be the same. It's just impossible in terms of the soil content, the longevity of the land, the process in which you do it, your temperature, like all of those things would be different. So I find that if you like the grain, you probably try all of them because they probably all taste very different. And that's kind of where vodka has unfortunately veered off, because it's gotten in this no flavor, should be ethanol forward, because it's made quick and cheap. And that's so this reputation, it's so unfortunate because it's like poor vodka. It has such a bad rep when it's the most consumed outside of in the country. And then ironically, sake is like the most consumed in the world. So rice is the most consumed in the world. So it's like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, even like, what is it? The Baijiu, you ever heard of that?
I have,
it's like it's like the most sold spirit in China, which is a rice-based. It's not a whiskey. It doesn't fit the requirements of a whiskey, but it's got some rice in it, apparently, like a lot of rice. I'm getting notes of a little bit of caramel, just off the nose.
Oh my gosh!
Like
we have to have a poll now: caramel or caramel?
Oh yeah. So that's one of the big things is like so one of the things me and Bryan always fight about, and my prior co-host was, here's a question for you. If you go to J.T. Meleck Distillery, and I don't know if you guys offer this, but there's something that someone would guide you around and maybe introduce you to a few things. But you know what you would call that? When someone guides you around? A tour, you say?
My husband
That's how
says
we should
tour.
say it. Yes, it's so messed up when people say tour.
Yeah. What were we saying the other day? He said, crap, he used the word. I'm like, why are you saying it like that? Like,
are you saying it what way?
But yeah, he says tour. And I'm like,
that's
tour.
So funny. Yeah, it's tour. Yeah, it's so weird because like you pick places in the country and it's like you can go either way. Like I'm from Philly and we say tour, but like in the Midwest they say tour, and people in like the Pacific Northwest say tour most of the time. And like, it's really
my
crazy.
husband and I, for a hot minute, we created a TikTok and we did those kind of videos where we say things differently. And there was one like Coke. We call everything. So it's like, hey, you want a Coke? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what do you want? And like Sprite.
Yeah.
All right, I'll get that for you. And like we did all those things, and he's like, they're Pepsi. And it like we did one of those, and it had caramel, it had Tor, it had all these things. It reached like 3 million people, and people were like,
dang.
it's not a Coke, it's a Pepsi. And people were like, screw Pepsi, it's a Coke.
Like pop, yeah.
It was great. Like hot minute, and then we got way too busy.
That's funny. So did your husband say pop?
Yes.
For like,
sure
okay, yeah.
He now just says like Pepsi to make it clear that he doesn't drink Coke and he's a Pepsi person. Like, I feel like they only bring in Pepsi in our local Walmart for him. Like, I swear there's only like a couple of containers and they just fill it up as he goes.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in the when it comes down to just breaking it down by like general name, I grew up in the soda side of the country where it's just like, give me a soda. What kind of soda? A Coke.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's funny.
Yeah, everything's Coke over here.
Yeah, I love that. So, did you grow up in Branch, Louisiana? That's cool. Yeah, and you said it was not too far from Lafayette.
No, it's like 25. I mean, it depends on what part of Lafayette. Lafayette is a very interesting city. Like geographically, like driving wise, it's probably one of the worst.
I believe it with all the bridges.
It goes down. It goes down, and it has they didn't think about the growth model going into it. So like if you have I-10, Lafayette used to be just right here, and they had 2 exits. You can come in, you can go to all your homes, and easy access back on. You're moving around, and now it is developed. Like if this is I-10, it has come all the way down here. We have a very wealthy part growing here called Youngsville and the surrounding area. That there, I mean, you are like an hour you have to go into Lafayette around to find, or you have to go out and around to the thruway to come back. Like, you're stuck, and it just keeps developing down. Like we have these 2 roads that have terrible traffic, and it has like a Dave and Buster's, a Topgolf, a Costco, a Target, and like all these restaurants packed with no extension of traffic, just extension of things that goes into like 4 different new towns. And so if you're trying to get to those places, you're looking at more of like an hour. But if you're just looking to get into like the main, what used to be the main heart of Lafayette, 25, 30 minutes, you can take some back roads. We're just at the first exit for Lafayette is exit 100, and we're exit 187. And we go on mile markers. I don't know if y'all do, but we're clean mile markers. So that's how many miles it is. And then just going up a little bit. But yeah.
That's sweet. I love New Orleans. And I assume that's a little further because like Lafayette is west of New Orleans, right?
It's east. Oh, sorry,
east?
Of New Orleans. I'm sorry. I was thinking New Orleans is
the other
east.
way.
Yes, it's west of New Orleans. I like to say there are 7 states in Louisiana. New Orleans is a different state. We have,
I believe
like,
it. It's like
country.
Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
Cajun country is completely different than New Orleans. And then we got anything above Alexandria is called North Arkansas. So
that makes
the North
sense.
of Louisiana is called, it's called Lower Arkansas. The North of Louisiana, we call it Lower Arkansas. So
that's
different
funny.
cultures, a lot of different cultures over here.
So I've in terms of Louisiana, I've driven through it a few times, especially on I-10. But I think I've only been to New Orleans. And so, how is it like very different in your side of the state from, especially you said the Cajun culture is like very different. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Oh, I mean, we can break it down to the food. I mean, I would say like, I don't want to break it down with the people because it is subjective, like
totally. That's
of,
like we hate those burgers when we live.
Yeah, like it's always like that. Like our culture is way better than yours, but I will say the food is way better. It's also a different style.
Nice.
New Orleans comes from a lot of different other cultures, bringing it
Makes
in.
Sense.
Like they're very jazz related. They're very much like when you talk about the different styles of Louisiana cuisine, they're tomato based, where we're roux based. So when you create your roux from scratch, so that's like the biggest difference you can see is a tomato, like a red paste versus your roux that you're breaking down, like bones, whether it's deer bones or whatever it may, or, using something to help initiate with onions and peppers. You have like when you do the initial veggies that go into it, our veggies stipulation is different. So but those 2 things, like if you were to go over there and get a gumbo, it would be red. It would be more.
I was just about to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. So our gumbo, our food's way better.
I am excited to visit that area of Louisiana now because I do enjoy
food, the best food. It's actually voted either it's the best food in Louisiana and the best food in like a top 10 in the country or something. I know Lafayette, like
Branch or Lafayette.
The Cajun country. So we are in Cajun country, like all of these different places. Oh, our best places are in the middle of nowhere, like Branch here, there. We have a lot of places that are just, you find it, you know where to go, in and around. Really good.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's a whole nother land than what I'm at in
Richmond,
it is. Virginia. Yeah, we're not known for a lot in Richmond. I always love places where you're known for something. Like, you go to Cajun country and you get a good, gumbo or, even I assume you got a great jambalaya out there,
Oh, yeah.
Like Philly, we were known for a few things. A lot of cheese whiz and, of course, cheese steaks and stuff like that. Cheese fries and stuff like that. But it's not like, it is the culture there, but it's not like, you can't really call cheese whiz a culture. But you can call gumbo a culture. You know what I mean? Like
it's our culture. We're sticking with it.
And it's funny. And then you go, other places. Heck, you go to like, certain parts of Texas and they're really good Tex-Mex or even just solid Mexican food.
Yeah.
And you go to, where else is like like you go to Maryland and they're really proud of their crabs and like really proud of like good crab cakes and stuff like that. But like where I'm at, it is a good place. It's got decent people, but they have nothing to be like super proud of. Although I will say, for those who are interested in coming to Richmond, Virginia, we do have a lot of local ice cream shops. And that's one thing that like they are a little bit proud of here is like, hey, I'm going to start my own ice cream biz. It's going to be different than everyone else's. And then everyone can decide whose ice cream joint they like the best. Because there's like a lot. They have maps of like, you know, T-shirts where they say like the maps of all the local ice cream joints.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. And it's cool because they're all local. And like, I'm huge into like, you know, local business and like stuff like, you know, entrepreneurship. And that's so cool. Yeah. So I've drank, I've drank this. And this is good. Like, okay, so I hate to compare it to bourbon, but this would actually make a really good bourbon, in my opinion. Like, if you told me this was corn.
Anytime people blind it, they have no idea it's rice. And that's most of the time 100%. When people ask me, what do you got? I'm like, just try it. Try it first, and then we'll talk about it. Like, so I'll talk about the rice afterwards so they don't, like, have this idea of what they think it is. But, any blind, they all think it's a bourbon. And I call it the Meleck lean because they come and they're like, if they know it's rice, they're like, I don't drink that. I'm like, just try it. Try it for me. And then they drink it, and they go back. They're like, what is this? It's rice? And I'm like, yes, you're welcome.
So one thing I noticed is that, you know, you drink a bourbon and you breathe in too much. And this is kind of one of the drinking things that you know, in the spirits world, you don't try to bring too much oxygen into your, you know, drinking because sometimes it can make it too, like the alcohol burns too much or make it more bitter or something like that. I just kind of got a good sip of this and then talked right after it. And I was like, this is still really good. This is still, it's brown sugary. Not all whiskeys are brown sugary. I like to say some are brighter and more white sugary, maybe even like corn syrupy or something like that. But this is really nice in the brown sugar department, especially in the palate. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to add some water. You can feel free to join, but I got to know. And the proof was like 96, 94, was it?
96.
Okay, 96. There we go.
No rhyme or reason why besides we liked it.
Hey, that's what it takes. Hey, if you didn't like it, I'd hope you wouldn't do it otherwise. So, same kind of nose. It's just very agreeable. Like, and that's not a bad thing. Like, some people would be like, oh, is it kind of your standard? No, it's like, it's very like approachable. Like I said earlier,
lingers on your tongue.
Yeah.
So like right in the back of your tongue, right in the center. It just lingers.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. I talked about it a little bit. Actually, I think I did a video yesterday talking about it because I talked about it with somebody and I realized I never really talk about it. But like, this one is designed to linger here to go with the nose. To give you an experience here, whereas the high proof is lingering here in the finish. It just kind of like drips. It's like butter. It just like a butter experience down your throat. So they both give off different things outside the proof.
This, I think water may have improved it, to be honest.
Well, that's good because we have been contemplating like an 80 proof for like a quick like lake whiskey. Bring it, mix it, like.
I don't know. I mean, it definitely didn't make it worse. I'll tell you that. It brought out a little more fruitiness, which is one of my favorite things about certain whiskeys. It's like, is it fruity? Like, can I get this bright, whether it be like berries or apples or pears or even just tropical fruit that sometimes you can get with like Irish whiskey and stuff like that. A little bit of everything here.
One of the reasons and we're contemplating the proof, but something that people don't realize about rice is a really oily grain. So the more water you add, the more the oil from the grain wants to separate from the water. And so that's when you get, we're not the only ones that like will dive into it or have it, but that's where you get like the frothin here, like in those pieces when it's not like a filtered whiskey, which we don't want to do those things because that changes the flavor. So anytime you see like filtered or chill filtered or all that stuff there.
Who would chill filter their whiskey? Am I right?
Yes. And so we actually have a hilarious story. For our first year, we didn't have any issues with the oil. It didn't like it wouldn't separate. 96 was good. It was solid. Like you won't see that with these two. The proof is too high. There's not enough water to even notice any of it. And sometimes when you let things sit, you'll see like little pieces at the bottom and you just like quickly go like this. It's back in. It's natural. It's oil. It's separating. And so we have this, and all of a sudden we randomly, it was probably a year ago at this point, like we had a solid, 6 batches before we had this issue. And my mom runs out and she's like, grab this. And she's like chasing me. And I'm like, grab it. And I'm like, what is this? I mean, it was everybody. It's like somebody hawked like big loogies into the whiskey. And there's a difference between like looking at it and from a marketing standpoint, red flag. Everything's buzzing. I'm like, bring it back. And the batch had just gone out. I had to go to our distribution center. I had to look at every single bottle they had. I went to all the retailers. I'm lifting it up because that's definitely what you need when you're getting a new person is they go to grab it and they're like, no. Because the average person would just see that as like boogers. They would not shake it up.
So they were like translucent kind of.
Oh yeah, you can see like big all floating pieces. Like absolutely crazy. And so I went over there and we still had 4 pallets of that batch. I'm going in, I'm chasing over here, blah, blah. Our distributor in the same ordered a pallet. They're coming to pick it up. I'm like, do not give them the pallet. I've got people. We're opening every single bottle. Every single one is filled with this thing. Well, my dad comes back from his trip. He comes in. He's like, what the? I've got everybody working. We're all just mid-stop. He's like, what is going on? And I'm like, it's the oil. Like, I don't know what happened, but it's like we use too much water. Like, I'm just going off because I'm stressing about it being on the shelf, Yeah. He's like, man, relax. Everybody knows that the oil's in there. It'll separate. They just shake it around. And I literally put it in his face. It was like right here.
You're like, look at this loogie.
It's like on the video. And he takes it.
That's
he
great.
was like, oh no, grab it all. I'm like, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Oh yeah. So now we are so hesitant to go under to give that oil more water to separate. We haven't had issues since. We also like test from the barrel to look at like the contents of what it is if you have a really oily barrel already. It gets really hot, separating all that stuff. But there's always a story, especially with me, for sure.
And I guess that's why some people chill filter their whiskey. I guess they don't want to have to deal with that at all.
Or if you get a dark bottle, if you get a dark bottle, most of the time they have that issue as well. So they use a really dark bottle so people can't see it.
Oh, I could see that happening with like certain scotches and stuff because you often get like, especially in certain areas like Isla or something, you might get like Ardbeg has a very dark bottle and they're known to be an oily scotch. So
it's possible. Like I know like 4 or 5 of them that have dark bottles specifically. Like New Riff is one of them. I'm not sure if they have. It's not a problem. I don't want to call it a problem, but I don't know if they chose black because it's cool or because they have that similar thing, so they chose black. So you just couldn't see it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So on the nose, this is the best option. Well, I just added ice. I didn't mention that, but I just added a little ice. And to be honest, it has the best nose of the 3 pours I've had yet. A little more fruity, a little more white sugary. And not that I don't like brown sugar, but it's just different. I appreciate this nose being a little more bright and fruity as opposed to just that standard caramel nose that I was getting before. I'm loving it. But let's see how the taste goes of palate here. Oh, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what I like more. I mean, even for a 96 proof or whiskey, that's decent with ice. And talk about a hot Louisiana day. Like this would go really well with ice, which is really hard to do with bourbons and ryes.
Yes.
Bourbons even more so. I'm impressed. I can't wait to try this single barrel with ice. Yeah.
I totally agree that like I think our whiskey is year round. Like you get like we're in the summer, people are like, oh, it's not whiskey time. I'm like, it's J.T. Meleck time for sure. That could be very refreshing.
I mean, I'm not just saying this. Like this is good with ice. Like, and it's rare. Like we had 2 episodes ago, we had Michter's bourbon, and we found it tasted even better. And for bourbons, it's rare it tastes good with ice, and it's even rare if it tastes better with ice.
Yeah.
That one was an anomaly, but this is good. I dare say this might even be better than the neat pour.
Whoop! I love when it can go with everything. So it just gives everybody their own experience.
Oh, man. Nice fruitiness. Okay. Let's switch over. I brought 2 extra glasses for the single barrel you sent me. And thank you for sending this because, this is different than what we've already drank. So I told Mia ahead of time, I said, we would love to try something that we haven't already done. And we had, at the drink along, we had already done the high proof, the 118 proof one. Which is like you told me it's like about a 12 barrel batch or, mix. And then the small batch is like about a 15 barrel mix. And so, of course, this is a 1 barrel thing, what we got here. But this one's higher proof than the 118. This is a mash or a cask strength at 123.7. So thank you for sending this. And let's get into it. And thank you for sharing not only 4-ounce samples, but like to the brim.
Oh, yeah. Don't want it shaking around.
Yeah, that's true. That's probably what I need to think about more when I courier my bottles to people. So, okay. Ooh, great nose off the neat pour. Let me dig into it a little more. The proof is good on the nose. It's funny to say that because the 96 proof was pretty good too, but I dig the depth of this comparatively.
We have really good noses. Really good. It just comes out.
It's not caramel like the small batch to me. This is much more. It's not as potent on the flavors of the nose, but I'm getting a lot more dark berry fruit on the nose for this one.
Yeah. What makes our single barrels so great is that each one is very different. Like, so It's like if you've gotten one of our single barrels, you haven't gotten them all, like I know some brands are kind of like that, just higher proof, but every single one, I think that's what makes our barrel program so successful is that you can really see like the characteristics come out in the pick from the retailer or the group. And then they just all have their own experience.
Holy crap, Mia. That's good. We talked about it on the drink along, and actually recently we were saying, I was talking to one of our guest co-hosts recently, and he said this is fantastic for a rice whiskey, very good for a bourbon, if it were a bourbon, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I am just every time I sip J.T. Meleck, I am impressed personally. Like, and I'm saying like this would make a good bourbon and like a good, decently aged bourbon as well. Like I would 100% buy a bottle. What would the standard single barrel run for at retail?
It kind of depends in our local market. I've seen it anywhere between 60 and 75.
Buy it now.
Consistently 60. In Texas, you're looking at a 4-tier system. In Louisiana, we have a cap. So we have a cap margin for retailers and a lower legal margin for distribution. Whereas in Texas, it's the distribution margin is almost double. You have 4 tiers and there's no cap on the retailer margin. So you're going to see it around like 85 to 92.
That's great.
Big difference. Yeah. I think it's worth it.
So good. This, like, I don't even know what this reminds me of. Like this, and that's a good thing because you don't want something that's like the rest. You want something that's different at the core, but also still really good uniquely otherwise. But let me try to get some notes. And feel free to chime in what you
Let me try it again. Like let me get a little bit more here. That's my favorite part. Yeah. Let me make sure I like that. Oh yeah, I liked it.
This is, I mean, the brown sugar's there. It is just, it's got a great proof to it. It's hard because I believe certain things. But I'm like, would people agree with me? Screw what people agree with. This is good. Like this is.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a depthful. Like, are you a whiskey nerd? Like, do you know much like in the bourbon world?
I I would say no, probably not.
That's awesome.
Especially when you put me on the tier system of like all these different places. No, I just try
you don't need to.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I wouldn't call myself that.
It's kind of cool because you're kind of like making your own stuff that you're like, this tastes good, as opposed to this tastes like Buffalo Trace, or something like that,
I realized like in the beginning, I definitely got, I don't want to say like self-conscious, but almost like we've gotten to the point where the industry and people sampling things almost makes you feel like you're so like subpar. You couldn't even drink that because we're getting like this. We're naming flavors that I'm like, all right, are you sure that's just what you had for dessert? And that's carrying like, I don't know where you got that from. Like, I don't know. We're just getting so crazy that it almost makes people not want to try things because they feel like it's overwhelming. And I'm like, it doesn't need to be overwhelming. And I really wanted to break it down to make it not so overwhelming when I started to think about this. And so how I actually don't really go in flavors besides your obvious like butter, caramel, butterscotch. I think those are like very obvious flavors that are consistent in oak barrels. But outside of that, I actually go, I have a background in college coaching, and everything that I did with my athletes was disc assessments. I don't know if you've ever done a disc assessment before, but it's a personality test where you fall on a spectrum of like how you react to things. So it helps you communicate within a team setting and know who's going to be successful in this situation, how to speak to this person, how to make people their most successful person. You can't talk to somebody that's high energy the same you do as somebody who's very shy. You have to be able to make people comfortable in their communication style so they come out. So that's the assessment. And so that's was cool. Like understanding things. That's how I do it. So I actually put our barrels through a disc assessment and I assess them in very logical terms. I do it in emotions, colors, and feelings because I taste it. And the first word that comes to my head, I write it down, a color, and I write the description. And that description puts it, I have like a circle and the barrels fall. And so that way, when I have barrel picks and I get to know people and I know they're coming, I pick 4 that fall within either different quadrants or 2 and 2 in quadrants that fit their personalities to make it really difficult for them to choose. And also they pick something that feels like them. And I've noticed that a lot of consumers will go to those retailers and be like, I felt like when I drank it, I was at the store. Like I felt like it fit, and I tried a different barrel over there and it's completely different. And I'm like, that's cool. So that's how I don't really go into like the apricot banana. I honestly can't taste that. Like I can't tell you what I'm getting besides I'm getting like lilac. I feel like the smell after a rain shower or like really like light green or the sun or like, ooh, that's dark. That's like really charcoal gray, and that's not a negative. I'm like, that's how I actually taste barrels. I have no idea in terms of flavors. And I had this guy that I used to like give things to get perspectives. And I mean, he was a chef before and he would go into like Coke floats and like all these things. And I'm just like, I don't know where you're getting that. That must be that must be from a chef perspective. I'm just like, so my palate must not be developed enough to get it. Also, my brain really can't. I'm like, there's no Coke in the barrel. I just can't get my head to say like, I think that's what you drank earlier today, and that's your subjective experience to going into this thing. But so I do colors, emotions, feelings, words to then figure out what I think a barrel is. So then when people pick. That's where I picked that one. So the one you're drinking right now is going to go to Specs in Texas next week. And that's a barrel that I chose for Chris. The family, we're very lucky to get in there and have them behind us. They're a family company as well, and they're big fans. So they basically just say, like, we trust your judgment. Choose what you think should go in the store. Right. So that's pretty cool for us.
So do you remember what color this one was?
Yes. So that one, I just looked at it. So I put a burgundy with a cloudy chance of rain.
Burgundy and cloudy.
I said burgundy, cloudy, chance of rain.
I love that.
It's just really like it's and what I mean by that is you almost feel like it and I don't mean that doom and gloom. So again, everything's subjective. It's an interpretation. But when it's cloudy, it's not so it's less of a burn. I'm not getting a burn. It's more subtle. It feels really good on the back here. It's like what I do chance of rain is it's not a full finish. So it's just kind of like dwindling. I made that word up. Along the burgundy is kind of like it's deep, but it finishes almost like the rain itself is going to make it like it doesn't feel like a 123. That's where I'm getting from that kind of chance of rain. It's a higher proof, but it actually kind of tastes lower than some of our small batches to me. So that's I'm trying to work through. Those are my keywords, and that's what I mean by that. If a single barrel, if I didn't like a single barrel, it would go into a small batch dump. We rarely don't like our barrels, but there are some that just won't hit it. It can't be a standalone. It has to batch. Some are mint, like the flavors, that's okay. Like it doesn't really do anything, but the nose, and so the nose has to go into the small batch in order to give it. So we have in some enhancer barrels. My father and I will battle it off. Like I'll get a really great barrel, but he doesn't have enough to make the small batch. And like, we'll go back and forth. I'm like, no, I think you're good. And he's like, you really think so? Try it. And I'm like, we're tasting like, oh, you're right. Not there. Not there. So we'll go and we'll just mix around until we've agreed on this is the barrels that are going to make this batch. This is the single barrels, and we move along and then we schedule it.
That's amazing. I love that. I love how you work together with that. I will say this. The water drop pour for the single barrel is actually better for me than the neat pour, which again is crazy to me. Like there's much more fruit. Oh man, the palate's amazing.
It goes into the concept of why we made this. So this you can call my baby, because when we first tasted the whiskey and ever since we batch it exit proof. So a lot of people, at least from our research, will bring it all the way down to 40. So like you're saying, adding water, so you're really getting a concept and build it back up. We don't do that. We just do it up. We just feel more comfortable doing it at exit proof. And anytime, I just felt like our whiskey, just adding a little bit of water brings it to that 117, 119. Yeah. And I just thought our whiskey, like it was done. Like I just always thought it was so good. And that's where the high proof came from, is giving that number of like, you just add a little bit and it's just so good every time. So you're basically getting that similar proof as one barrel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest. I'll be up front with you. When we have members of the distilling, or like when we have members of the company that's making the whiskey, we don't give ratings. But normally we do every episode, but we say, we don't want to be influenced anymore. We used to, but we don't want to be influenced anymore by the people being on the podcast. That being said, if I found this bottle for $80 to $90, I would pick up 3.
Yes.
I'll say that. So no rating, no score rating, but like I would be grabbing this one for sure. Much fruitier, much even fruitier than the small batch. It is depthful. Like, honestly, have you ever heard of George T. Stagg?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this is George T. Stagg, but I'm saying this is as toffee-like and just has some depth to it, like a stag, which is typically anywhere between a 12 to 15 year bourbon.
So you're not the first person to say that. I've actually had like a dozen or so people say like it's a stag. It compares to a stag, or it's better than a stag. So it's funny that you say that. This is
amazing. And I know there's people out there, they'll be like, oh, it's a rice whiskey. How good could it be? Try this.
Try it.
Yeah. All right. I'm dropping a cube in the final pour to see if it even beats the water drop pour. Man, that's good.
I like to put my bottles in the freezer sometimes. So you get, like, if I really like the proof, but I want it cold, freezer.
Yeah, I'm not against that. I mean, like, really impressive that, like I said, bourbons are really hard to taste better with ice, but rice whiskeys so far are very good with ice.
So good.
But we'll see how this single barrel goes so I got to admit,
now that I've mentioned the put it in the freezer, I do like to do a PSA, because this is something that I've learned in terms of myths in like the industry. You always hear that you can put vodka in your freezer and it won't freeze because it's alcohol, but that's actually a myth. Not to say that the whole thing will freeze, but it's actually based on the temperature of your freezer and what type of freezer you put it in, because all alcohol, besides our single barrels, have water added. So depending on the temperature, if your freezer is at a temperature that freeze like ice, You will freeze the water in it. So it's actually,
that means even higher proof.
Most of the time it comes from a reputation of people actually stripping the vodka reputation of stripping your grain and expanding it and getting a lot of tails and ethanol forward. You're actually getting less water, even though it says 80, you're getting more because they've stripped it and you're getting, that's what's making you sick. That stuff doesn't freeze. Ours will. If you put it in the freezer, you will get like a slushy because it truly is 80 proof with real water and with the grain. So you'll get like a slushy thing. You won't really see it in the 96 as much. That gets a little too high, but you could see a couple of pieces. But it's a misunderstanding thinking that this is not all alcohol. It's 80 proof. So 80% of it.
It's not even half alcohol.
That's always something I like to tell people because it's kind of like, what? Because the first time I did it, I was like, why is it slushing around? And so that was something we learned.
Oh, that's good. Just sip the first sip with some ice. So one of the things I like with bourbon is with ice, typically, it gets to be youthiness shows up, like a youth of the whiskey can show up. And sometimes that can be a little soapy. Sometimes that can be a little just too wide or something. Is that your daughter, for the record? Yeah. I don't mind at all. I have a 3-year-old myself, and I told her sometimes, actually, especially on interview episodes, my 3-year-old will come into the room and like hop in my lap and like, can I join you? And it's like, absolutely.
She's an inch out the door. She's like,
oh, it's so cute. I love that. Is that a toy? Is that a chicken or something?
There you go.
Oh, so we were talking beforehand about how hard, but also rewarding that parenting can be. And Mia has a 3-year-old who shall remain nameless unless you care.
Her name's Hadley. I love her name. Hadley.
Hadley. Hadley.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I love that. So my daughter's name is Beck, and she'll sometimes be like, she'll be at the door like, Daddy, I need you. And I'm
every time.
And then it's like, come in my lap. And we did one episode of the drink-alongs where Beck just hopped in and we just made it a thing. Like, we're like, Beck can join. And she was the silliest little girl, and she was spinning around in the back, and it was just an amazing episode. And some people like commented like, Beck actually made that better. And I'm like,
oh, I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This girl, she wants to get into the camera. I felt so bad. I did one the other day, and she because they stopped talking to her, they then went back to the comments, and she was like, why are they not talking to me? Why are they not talking to me? I'm like, sweetie,
that's so cute.
You can't keep yelling or you can't be in the camera. And she's like, oh. And she like storms off. The other guy was like, oh. I'm like,
I told her, is Hadley a girly girl?
Not sometimes.
Not so much. Yeah.
Right now, like, she's just her own, like, she's very, very smart. Very, very intelligent, high emotions, because I think those are signs of intelligence. Not just coming from like, oh, my daughter's the smartest, but other people have said.
No, I get it.
She's always listening. She analyzes. She answers. Like, I bought her this game the other day, and it's supposed to be like a difficult, like, 3-year-old level of all these different puzzles and things. I felt like it was the Rubik's Cube kid. She just goes,
Dang,
that was easy.
Get it, Hadley?
So I had to go to like the 5-year-old level. And so like right now, like 1 minute she's like, oh, I don't want to touch it. And the next minute, like she's wearing a Cocomelon pajama top with a frou-frou dress with one boot and one sandal. And she dressed herself. I'm like, let's do it. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Rock it, girl.
Start this day. That's so
She's like, I got tired and I didn't want to change my shirt. I'm like, I feel that. I don't like changing it. Let's go.
You get it, girl. You get it. Yeah. My daughter, she is such a girly girl, and we never like pushed this on her. We were never like, be princessy, be anything like that. And she is like,
oh my gosh,
like, and that's so cute. She'll be like, I put on this dress and I'm just gonna twirl for you guys, and I'm gonna put my hands like this as I twirl. And very smart, very articulate for a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Her friends are like putting out a few words, and she's like doing full
Same
conversations
with
and
her.
stuff.
She
Yeah.
has full conversations. Like people are like, and I've just always spoken to her normal. I've never done like baby talk. So I don't know if that helps. But yeah, no. But girlfriend, her hair is constantly. She don't do bows, ponytails. I try to just like get it back, especially since it's so hot. I'm like, no. She'll do it like she's like, look at this outfit, and she spins and she's like, look at me.
It's so great.
That's the most girly she'll get.
Oh yeah, being a girl parent. Like honestly, from an early age, I said if I'm gonna have kids, I'm gonna have daughters, and so I'm batting 1,000, and I'm getting the vasectomy soon. So yeah, 2 girls, and yeah, I am meant to be a girl dad, and I don't want that boy. My parents had 2 girls. And then they're like, all right, last kid. Hopefully it's a boy. We want a chance at a boy here. And they had another girl.
Oh,
and they're like, guess we're giving up on that boy. And then I showed up as the blessing. And but I'm like, I don't want a blessing at this point. God willing that I have a boy, and it's gonna be amazing, and he'll be amazing. But I am getting that vasectomy soon because I love being a girl dad.
We're done.
Yeah.
I just love the commentary. Like sometimes I feel like my husband says she's me, and she will say like out loud the stuff that I would love to say if I can get away with it. And she just like straight looks at people and she's like, "Why are you doing that?" Like what we were in. She just had surgery and we're in the waiting room. And this guy is like picking the bottle cap, like really loud though. It's like going off, and it's like 5 in the morning. She like has her bear, and she's like, "Excuse me, why are you doing that?"
That's so great, and it's like you were like, thinking that like no one else was. Like,
sorry, and she's like, "Stop that! It's too loud." And
get it, Hadley. Get it. That's amazing. So okay, let me get back to the tasting or the palate notes. Oh, that's good. Impressive for a 4 to 5 year whiskey. Really impressive. I can't wait to find out what a 6, maybe even 8 year whiskey will taste like.
I'm excited. Woo.
Yeah, we'll have you on again with Bryan when that happens. Because this is very good. Dare I say it? I don't know if it's better than the water drops pour, but it is not worse. I'll tell you that. So just as good. And like, who wouldn't love a cold whiskey here and there? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
What you guys are doing with rice whiskey, keep it up.
Thank you.
That's all I got to say. Yeah, we don't give ratings, even though I was about to. I was like, this is good. But I recommend, if you viewer on YouTube or listener on Podcast World, if you haven't had JT Meleck, I know Shared Pour, is that the one you guys work with sometimes?
We have done a few group picks through them, but all of our stuff's on Bourbon Outfitters.
Bourbon Outfitters. Okay, cool. So check out Bourbon Outfitters. If you're not in the, tell me where you can typically buy, besides Texas and Louisiana, where can you typically buy JT Meleck?
Oh, we're distributed in Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, and then shipping through Bourbon Outfitters, which we always try to have all of our items available on there. I think we're out of stock right now, but we're filling up next week. So we should be sending some more stuff out for anybody that wants it shipped to them.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Here's the hard thing is that, like, for example, like that one listener, viewer, friend of ours that was like great for insanely good for a rice whiskey, great but not like blow your mind for a bourbon. And I'm like, no, this is still blow your mind for me. Like I just think this is great.
It truly is. Like, especially when you look at everything, I'm like, it is like, anytime people say like, oh, you should make a bourbon, you should do this, you should add 10% of this. I'm like, But why? We're making something that nobody else has. Why would we want to blend in?
Cutting edge.
Why blend in when you can stand out?
Yes. And that's the thing is like, and it's not even bad. Like sometimes people stand out for being bad. Like I'm not even going to mention distilleries, but like some of these small time distilleries that are putting out things that are experimental.
Yeah.
But are experimental. That's all I got to say. What you guys are doing is really good. Like I just can't get past how good this is.
Thank you. I love that. Best reaction.
And like, yeah, I laud you guys. I give you guys some credit because this is, so, okay. Tell me real quick before we close it out. Who is there a distiller? Is there a guy or woman in charge of this, or is it you and your dad?
We have a distiller that two distillers that run the still itself.
Okay, cool.
Their names are Brett. Brett is our head distiller, and then Brad is our assistant distiller. Like in terms of maintaining, because you got to stand at those things all day.
Yeah.
Do we all know the processes? Yes, we all have to learn and do it. But at the everyday, Brett is our head distiller, and Brad is our assistant distiller.
That's amazing. So okay, do you know? If you don't know this is totally fine. But do you know typical exit still proof on these guys?
Oh, we aim for 122.5, but we let it run 119 to 125. We will not stop it. Amazing. So we don't have the people for it. And we found that in the beginning, we just were like constantly maintaining and trying to get it on that mark. And then we realized that we're really not held to a standard of a mark like a bourbon is.
Yeah.
And so as long as it ranges, it makes really good. Like, so we found that 119 to 125 comes out with some clean distillate. So that's where we let it run.
And then barrel entry proof. Do you know that one?
The our lowest one has been 119.7. Our highest 125.2 for the entry. For our exit, our lowest has been 117.1 and our highest has been 128.6.
That's amazing.
And our distillates
and I love
go
those
in
details.
3.5 barrels. So like every distillate we have, those 3 barrels will have the same entry proof. They won't have the same exit proof. They won't do the same thing. But every distillate does about 3.5 barrels.
That's amazing. So this 6-year, do you know what that turned out to be?
We're going to do a 110. We're going to do a small batch and do it at 110 proof.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yes, sweetie.
Keep it up. Keep it up, Mia. And keep it up, Hadley. But we'll probably close out soon with that. Mia, thank you so much. I think it's amazing to have someone so passionate about whiskey, someone so good a mom as well. And hi Hadley. Hi.
Say hi.
How are you doing? Oh, you are beautiful. I'm sure you're beautiful on the inside too.
Thank you.
Hi. Oh, you're so sweet. But Mia, I hope that we can have you on in the future, especially when you're producing more 6-year and 8-year barrels. I hope we can have Hadley on too when she's a little older as well.
You like these?
A sweet little blondie, just like mine.
Yeah. She's basically a replication of both me and my husband. Depends on who she's next to.
That's what it's all about. So my first is definitely Heather. She's girly. She is blonde. And my second daughter is definitely more me. People look at my second daughter, Gray, and they're like, that's Cole.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have a little split of both. But I love being a father for that reason because it's so much fun.
Absolutely. It's always an adventure, sweetie.
Yeah, that's what exactly it is. It's an adventure. But most of all, listeners, I hope that our love of spirits. Nope, ruined it already. I hope that our love
You're
of
so
whiskey,
focused.
Yeah, exactly. Lifted your spirits. Who would
So
chill filter their whiskey? Am I right?